Hi, everyone, and welcome to North American Carbon World, to this session entitled, Will COP26 Finally Deliver on the Promises of the Paris Agreement? And firstly, I want to give a big thank you to the Climate Action Reserve and all the sponsors for putting together this virtual conference and inviting me to moderate this great session. My name is Alexa Kleysteuber. My current title is Mommy to a 2-month-old and a 3-year-old, but I was most recently working on the Chilean COP25 presidency team and late last year with EDF on a project for mobilizing voluntary carbon markets to drive Paris-aligned climate action. I want to thank everyone for joining us on what has been an extremely exciting day for climate progress. The U.S. is back in the game, as we see, and I'm sure a lot of you have had a long day already watching the climate summit from early this morning. So, and it is also getting late here on the East Coast where I am, but I promise to do my best to keep the session lively and moving. And we've got some great panelists today with us who are extremely well suited to answer this important question of, will COP26 deliver? So thank you for joining us. In terms of run of show, we are going to have no PowerPoints. We just want to have a discussion, among these great panelists. I'm going to briefly introduce them all, and then I have some burning questions for each of them. And I will also save some time for Q&A near the end of the session. Just wanted to point out here that in the platform, in the Hopin platform, there is not only a chat function, but there's also a Q&A tab separately, which is new for me, but I think it'll be really useful to separate out the questions from the commentary. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and just put them into the Q&A tab so that they're easier for the panelists to read through and prepare for, and for me to kind of coalesce, to bring together at the end when we start to go through them. And with that, I will introduce our distinguished panelists. So first, we have Kate Robinson. Kate heads the Energy and Environment team at the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. She oversees the UK's engagement in the US on energy and climate issues, both at the federal and subnational level. Kate came to DC from Whitehall, where she worked in a number of roles, including managing a wide range of climate finance funds, including multi-billion-pound donor funds, as well as specialist technical assistance funds and green finance funds. Next, we have Alden Mayer, who is a strategic advisor on domestic and international climate policy and politics. He is currently serving as a senior associate with E3G and an international policy advisor to the Blue-Green Alliance and a principal at Performance Partners. So Alden, as you all know, is everywhere all at one time with many hats and juggling many balls. He has more than 4 decades of experience on environmental and energy issues, most recently as Director of Strategy and Policy for the Union of Concerned Scientists. We are very, very honored to have Alden as well as Kate, and last but not least, Juan Pedro Searle from Chile. He is the head of the Climate Change Office at the Chilean Ministry of Energy. He has nearly 20 years of experience on climate, much of which has been dedicated to the UNFCCC negotiations, back to Kyoto and through Paris. He's been a part of the COP presidency team as well, the Chilean team, with a focus on Article 6. And in addition to UN negotiations, he has been involved in the design of carbon pricing schemes in Chile, mainly through the World Bank's PMR, where he's the national focal point. So we have great panelists for you today. And with that, we will dive right into the content here. We'll start with you, Kate. Top on everyone's mind, I think, looking forward from today, especially after generating a lot of excitement with the new US NDC and lots of great announcement from other countries. Will the COP still take place, given what we know with COVID and with the rate and geographic distributions of vaccines, presenting equity issues and all these, this really second or third surge that we're seeing in various countries. What is the thinking currently on the COP taking place in Glasgow this November? Is there any chance it could take place virtually or with reduced participation, or potentially be postponed again? What's the scoop? Let us know.
Thanks, Alexa, and thank you very much for inviting me to be on the panel today. Obviously, yeah, great question. I mean, the number one priority for us, I should just say up front, is that, we want to hold both a safe COP and a very successful COP. And our role as COP host is to represent all of the countries that are members under the UNFCCC, and of course we host this event on behalf of the UNFCCC. So as you can imagine, there are lots of conversations going on right now with decision makers kind of right across the board, including kind of on the health side, but obviously on the climate side with the UNFCCC. And our intention is absolutely to hold an in-person event at the first 2 weeks of November this year. But of course, we're watching the situation regarding the pandemic very closely. We will be definitely watching. There's a few kind of key milestones that are in the lead up to COP that are due to take place over the next couple of months, including some of the negotiation milestones. So I think it's really important that we let those go ahead and we see how they play out and we learn lessons from those. We're of course doing contingency planning. We have no intention to delay at all. We may have to consider whether we have some sort of virtual participation. The whole priority for us, as I say, is that it's a safe event, but also that it's a diverse and inclusive event. So we need to balance all the needs of the participants to try and find a way through. So it's definitely still an evolving situation, but that's where we're at currently.
Great, thanks. And maybe Alden, I'll turn to you. In terms of the COP, if things do get worse and there are issues, and with the UK government making decisions and with the bureau at the UNFCCC looking at the situation as well, what are some of the one of the options, and what are kind of the what could hypothetically happen, given your experience with UNFCCC negotiations? What are people talking about at this point, more from the ground up and kind of theorizing?
Well, thanks for having me and doing this. It's a great opportunity after this exciting day. Just to start, we're in unknown territory here. We've never had a COP in such a pandemic. We didn't have COPs in 1918 when we had the Spanish flu. So at least I didn't go to it. Maybe we had one. So I think that's the big question. There's different options. One option obviously would be to hold it like a regular COP, full blown, with everyone vaccinated. That raises issues of vaccine equity if you're vaccinating delegates and observers, particularly from developing countries that don't have full access to vaccine for the rest of their population and frontline workers. You can see the political problems that would cause. Another would be to do a hybrid COP where you have a limited number of people, ministers, heads of delegation, senior negotiators, secretariat staff in person, and everything else is virtual. A third would be to try to do a full virtual COP, which I think would raise a lot of issues in terms of negotiating equity, in terms of effectiveness, certainly in terms of the ability of civil society observers, indigenous representatives, others, to influence the negotiations, because we don't negotiate directly, but we play a very influential role in trying to help push for greater ambition. And the fourth would be to postpone it, just like we did last year to this year. None of them are ideal. And I think those are the equities the UK and the Secretariat and the Bureau of the UNFCCC are going to have to weigh. You could obviously have a political segment. You could still have the leaders come from the G20 summit in Rome to Glasgow for the opening day of the COP and be joined by other leaders for the kind of momentum event that we had in Paris in 2015, high-level event, and then have ministers there and not too many other people, and really not focus on the negotiating issues like Article 6 or transparency or common timeframes, but really focus on raising political impetus that COP is designed to produce, and then conduct some virtual negotiations on the technical issues, but postpone the final adoption into next year. You could even scenario, suspend the COP as the Dutch did in 2000 and resume it in 2022 when it's safe to have a full-blown negotiating session. So there's many options, but yeah, I think as Kate said, your priority one is safety. You can't have it be a super spreader event. That would be irresponsible, and people would not want to come if they were concerned about that. But you also can't have it where you're limiting the ability of vulnerable countries or indigenous or civil society representatives to fully participate in the process and just leaving it to a handful of the big players. That would not be optimal either.
Thanks. Yeah. So it's a tough decision, and I think the key there is right. There's still a lot of things in flux, and so it seems like probably we won't know anything definitive for at least a few months. But at least a lot of options on the table, and something will happen. We just don't know exactly.
Well, and just to say that the Bureau just last week made the decision on the Bonn session, the SB sessions that were scheduled to be in Bonn in person in June, and they decided to do them as formal sessions virtually.
Right.
So I'm assuming the UK and the Bureau have some running room here. They don't have to make the final decision until sometime this summer. Kate may know more about exactly what the timing is, but they've got a little bit of running room to see how the pandemic and vaccinations and other things play out.
Great. Well, we'll keep an eye on that, I'm sure. And maybe with that, I'll go back to you, Kate, on if you could run us through some of the key deliverables that the UK is looking for out of COP26. I think, what are the expectations on all these issues? I think everybody kind of knows about Article 6 and the fact that, it wasn't finished in Katowice and then didn't close again last year, 2 years ago in Madrid. That's kind of a big one that we know is pending. And obviously NDC enhancement is top on everyone's agenda, especially today. But if you could walk us kind of through maybe the big list of what are the 3, 4, 5 things that the UK is really hoping to get out of this COP, and especially looking towards towards fulfilling the Paris goals.
Of course, no, it's definitely a very, very broad list. COP26 is the next kind of really major international milestone after Paris itself. So the number one priority is, of course, kind of raising ambition under the 3 pillars of the Paris Agreement. So mitigation, adaptation, and finance. So you mentioned new NDCs. Obviously, it was great to see the US's announcement today and the other ambition announcements that came forward. There's still a huge gap in where we need to get to if we are going to keep warming to below 2 degrees, or even if we're going to enable us to have the trajectory to meet 1.5 degrees under the Paris Agreement. So top priority is definitely to see countries come forward with increased ambition through their NDC process and through their long-term strategies. But of course, it's not only about increased ambition around mitigation. Adaptation is absolutely vital. If we stopped emitting greenhouse gases today, we would still be dealing with the consequences of changing climate. So it's really, really important that we elevate that adaptation conversation, and we work to support the most vulnerable communities that are really on the front line of climate action. And so through COP, we want to see countries come forward with new adaptation communications to set out how they're going to take that forward. And then, of course, on finance, it's really important that developed countries come forward with increased climate finance pledges to meet the 100 billion goal that we set from 2020 onwards. But of course, the investment needed to meet the Paris Agreement will not only come from the public. We're working very, very closely with the private sector to kind of green broader financial systems to channel the finance needed to meet the Paris Agreement. But I've just flagged as well under COP, we have an overarching focus on a couple of key sectors that I've just mentioned. So we have a particular focus on the energy sector, and that's about how can we use the COP process to really collaborate internationally to move away from coal-fired generation and help countries move to much cleaner generation quicker. We're also prioritizing transport. We basically need to double the rate of transition towards zero emission vehicles. If we're going to meet the Paris Agreement, we need all new cars to be zero emission by 2040. And therefore, it's imperative that we use the COP process to bring together, especially key economies, but also the private sector and other key decision makers to drive that transition in the transport sector. And And then finally, it's nature. So nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions provide a really cost-effective way to mitigate and adapt to climate. So sit across the 3 pillars I set out. And so we're working to, for example, in sustainable agriculture and other sustainable commodities to try to reduce our impact on natural systems, especially to reduce deforestation, to help us enable the Paris goals. Of course, the negotiations sit under all of this. The UK has a key role as how we describe as an honest broker to help enable us to find a route through the negotiations. And then finally, I would just add that COP26 will be an all of society COP. As Alden has set out, it's absolutely vital that we have civil society there, subnational actors there, businesses, states, cities. We're working with all of them across the piece on the priorities I've just set out, because they all have an absolutely vital role to play if we're going to make this transition as fast as we need to. So that's quite a long list, but still at a high level, some of the key deliverables for COP.
That's good. There's always a lot, but as you said, I think this COP is that first ratchet up moment that was envisioned, at Paris. It's that first 5-year cycle, although now it's become a 6-year thing, just temporarily, we hope. But yes, I mean, this is kind of a true test of, the robustness of that framework, that 5-year framework that was envisioned in Paris. And so I think all eyes are certainly on those NDCs and kind of that cycle, and how much more do we get, towards Paris? Like, how much of a step does it take us, especially if we only get those step changes every 5 years? We need to make big leaps, not just little steps. So yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And certainly, even more so than ever, all eyes on this COP. And with that, maybe I'll turn to my friend and old colleague, Juan Pedro. Article 6 is one of those issues that, as I mentioned, kind of has gotten stuck along the way and should have been resolved already by this time, but seems to be kind of stuck in the mire here, and really trying to close this issue on carbon markets. And I wanted to come to you with all your experience on Article 6 and a lot of the interest from, I think, those participants who usually come to NACW on markets. Can you walk us through Article 6 specifically, and how close did we get to an agreement at COP25 on carbon markets? And what are the key remaining issues? Kind of what is their nature? Are they political, technical? What's holding us up?
Okay, thank you, Alexa, and thanks for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here. It's an excellent conversation, and yeah, I think you brought it up. Article 6 is one of the main issues also for COP26. We have to close the deal, and let me also add transparency. I mean, transparency is also it's the backbone, to me, it's the backbone of the Paris Agreement. So there's also some tasks that we need to finish in COP26. So it's, as Kate said, it's a long list. But concerning Article 6, you were there with me in Madrid until the late hours. It was a very, we got so tired, tireless, endless hours in discussing with many groups, and Minister Schmidt was, I was surprised about her role there. And yeah, it's a mix of technical and political issues. We were, this close. My impression is that we were this close to set a deal in Madrid, but we couldn't. And I guess because parties, still needed more time. We had quite, time in Katowice, then in Madrid, and before Katowice also. But whenever people comes with a new proposal to try to, to get some compromises, to bring solutions to the table, some parties need more time to address those and understand them better, especially when those refer to this, big, 5, 6, or 3 key main issues. But just for those who might not know the nitty-gritties of Article 6, I would say that the main three big issues that still remain, of course, unresolved, and I would say that positions are more or less the same since Madrid. The first one is, I would say, accounting in general. Accounting, I mean, how parties are going to use Article 6 and account for, I don't know, whatever unit they transfer or use for the purpose of, I don't know, increasing ambition or achieving Article 6, NDCs or NDCs goals, or for other purposes. So, but specifically accounting regarding Article 6.4, which is, this article that supposed to deliver this new mechanism, very similar to the clean development mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol. And that accounting is so relevant because for some, you don't need to account for those actions or activities that are outside your NDC, your nationally determined contribution. For some, you don't need this accounting. For others, you need this accounting because otherwise you will be jeopardizing the whole environmental integrity of the Paris Agreement, and not only of Article 6. So I think that's the main issue in terms of accounting in general, but specifically on this new mechanism. Another big issue was this chart of a levy or a fee, I don't know how to name it right, this so-called share of proceeds to the transfers of this. I don't know how much the audience knows about this acronym, the ITMOs, this International Transfer Mitigation Outcomes of Article 6.2. So, of course, this is not written in the Paris Agreement. So for a big chunk of countries or parties and group of parties, this is not allowed. For some, you will need to do a 2.0 Paris Agreement, or to go to your Congress and do the approval process all over again. So, but for some, you need to do that because otherwise you will be in a situation in a unbalanced situation regarding 6.4 and 6.2. I'm sorry if I'm getting too technical, but these are the one of the main, I would say, one of the main problems also to reach an agreement in Madrid. The third one is this transition, this whole knowledge of transition of the CDM, this clean development mechanism, to the Article 6.4, to basically from a Kyoto Program mechanism to the Paris Agreement. And that, of course, raised a lot of concern of many parties. Are you going to transition just the methodologies, the projects, or the units? There's a lot of concern about how this could improve or jeopardize, again, the environmental integrity and also the ambition, the overall ambition of the Paris Agreement. So this, to me, these are the main three elements. Of course, there's a lot of technicalities among these three issues. But let me say something. I think Kate mentioned this before as one of the main topics for COP26, this whole issue of financing, especially for financing of adaptation. And you were there, Alex, and I recall from Madrid, it was it was kind of surprising, at least for me, that financing for adaptation became a big issue, not only because it was linked to this share of proceeds thing, but also because parties, developing countries, especially from Africa, needed robust, I would say, commitment from developed countries in terms of how adaptation is going to be financed. And that became something that in the end the solution wasn't accepted by this country, the solution in terms of Article 6. My personal view on that is that we need a different way of treating financing for adaptation. You cannot rely just on markets to finance, because the needs for adaptation are so huge. You see some studies in terms of the need for adaptation. There's no way the market could deliver that on that. And Alden, you can tell me better. You can tell better than myself that the share proceeds of the CDM, it's not financing the real needs of developing countries. So I will leave it. coming to your sorry, I'm extending too much, but coming to your second question, is this political technical? At this point in time, it's very political. I mean, the decisions are not technical in nature. You can work those details after COP26, but this is very, very political. So, I'll stop there. Thank you.
No, thanks. It's complicated and it's detailed, and I think that is a good explanation of why it's been so hard. You know, there's just a lot of elements to it and very entrenched positions, and it's hard. You know, it's hard to see how it's going to squeak through. I think probably for this audience, it's relevant to ask, you know, what happens in a world with no agreement on Article 6. You know, do we just postpone a few years and get stuff on the ground running and then come back to it, or you know, or what happens? Because these are the international rules that eventually parties will play by, you know, for accounting for these internationally transferred mitigation outcomes for carbon markets. So maybe Alden, really quick before we get to the big, you know, other sexy topic of the day, the summit and the new NDCs. Maybe just if you could just quickly touch upon what happens in a world with no agreement on Article 6. What you know, how important is it to have the rules in place right now versus you know, in the near future?
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think you need to look at the different elements of Article 6. There's Article 6.2 and Article 6.4. And Article 6.4, which looks to creating a new development mechanism to replace the clean development mechanism. There's no new mechanism created. Article 6.2, on the other hand, is kind of the rules of the road for country to country trading. So there, if you don't have agreement, there's nothing preventing countries from doing their own trades with their own rules, and you go into a Wild West scenario. And there, I think the strategy of those countries that signed the San Jose Principles, for example, in Costa Rica before Madrid, and the NGOs that are seeking to promote environmental integrity in market mechanisms, the strategy there would be to push countries to basically adopt something along the line of the San Jose Principles as the informal rules of the road, and try to isolate or punish countries that do deals. You know, if Brazil tried to carry over some of the CDM credits, for example, that most NGOs in Brazil don't think have real environmental integrity, there would be campaigns in the US, in Europe, and in Japan to try to prevent anyone from buying them or taking those credits forward. You know, that would be the strategy. I don't know if it's 3 strikes and you're out in Glasgow, if the third time's a charm. You can pick your metaphor there. But, we certainly, it's important to get the rules right and to make sure we don't sacrifice environmental integrity, because the impacts of a flawed system could be pretty big from the technical analysis that's been done in terms of additional emissions to the atmosphere. But it's also important that we not see this Glasgow summit maybe obsess as much about Article 6 as Madrid did. I mean, it was the elephant in the room, and it was very hard to get any agreement on it, obviously, as Juan Pedro said. We don't want it to be something that dominates the Glasgow summit. It's important. We need to get the rules right, but we really want Glasgow to focus on the broader issues that Kate outlined at the beginning, of raising ambition, of raising finance, of dealing with adaptation. And the other elephant in the room, frankly, we haven't talked about loss and damage, which is separate than adaptation and is something that vulnerable countries and international NGOs are saying needs to be addressed on top of adaptation. We need to create a separate funding stream of ultimately hundreds of billions of dollars by 2030 to deal with the unavoidable impacts of climate change that countries are now facing, and that will increase over the next few decades because of past emissions to the atmosphere. No matter what we do, we could get to net zero overnight, and impacts will continue to mount at least for the next few decades. So we have to address resilience, adaptation, and loss and damage, and I think that's a pretty big topic for the UK to try to manage. It's been a very toxic issue in these negotiations for over a decade. I remember doing shuttle diplomacy in 2012 in Qatar at the Doha COP between the US and the small island states to prevent the US from blowing up the whole summit over the loss and damage issue. We have to address it, but it's very politically sensitive, even more so than Article 6.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that too. Loss and damage is a very I don't know, it's emotional and it's intense, as you said, and it can lead to very, very like brinksmanship, which is where nobody wants to be at UNFCCC discussions. So it's good always to keep that in mind as well when we're thinking about outcomes. But I think you also mentioned it, taking us back to kind of the $1 million question here. This COP needs to raise ambition. So regardless of other things, Article 6 and transparency, this is the ambition raising COP. And with that, let's go back to the other big issue of the day, which is the climate summit, the U.S. climate summit, and the newly announced U.S. NDC, 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. I know this is what a lot of NGOs and business community and so many were advocating for in terms of what's needed by science and where we need to go. How is the reaction to it? What's the reception so far? What are your thoughts and feelings on it? Is it enough to get us that leverage that we need to say the U.S. is back in the game and everybody needs to really bring their game, or will it do enough to bring others on board towards Glasgow and to get us a real step change in the level of ambition by the COP?
You want me to start with that, or Kate?
Yeah, I'll throw that back to you, Alden. I think that's for you.
Yeah. Well, clearly, as you say, we were pushing for the U.S. to put forward an at least 50% NDC. To be clear, the science and equity would require more from the U.S. Others, such as the Climate Action Tracker, have put out a range of, I believe, 58 to 63% plus, ramping up financing for developing countries as closer to our fair share, but it's a doubling of the 2025 NDC that Obama put forward of 26 to 28%. And it's going to take tremendous action and activity by not only the Biden administration, but by states, local governments, business, investors, the whole coalition that was part of We Are Still In during the Trump years. And it's going to take action by Congress, frankly. To move on the American Jobs Plan and on the budget proposals and on tax incentives and a whole host of other fronts. So it's by no means easy to get to that level. It's going to take a whole of government approach and a whole of society approach, frankly. I think it did have an impact, certainly on some of the other countries that came forward today. Some of us were very engaged with Japan and Canada and South Korea in the run-up to the summit. And I can tell you, well, we weren't totally satisfied with Prime Minister Suga's commitment. The fact that Japan committed to 46% and to try for 50% by 2030 compared to where they were 3 months ago is huge. Same thing with Canada. It didn't get to the range that we were pushing for of matching the US 50%. The Canadian NGOs were pushing for 60%, but 40 to 45% is a big step up from where Canada was. I think the main thing that's holding Canada back is its failure to acknowledge the reality that production from the tar sands in Alberta is not going to continue at the levels that it is currently with the realities of the oil markets. But be that as it may, I think both in the case of Canada and Japan and South Korea with its cutoff of external coal financing in Asia, I think all of those show the power of the U.S. coming back to the table with a credible NDC. The next shoe for the U.S., which we can talk about if you want to, is finance. The budget that the administration put forward for this next fiscal year didn't go as far as some of us would like to see in terms of making up the full $2 billion that the U.S. was in arrears on the Green Climate Fund pledge that Obama made. But the 4-year plan that President Biden showcased this morning, I think, is a serious commitment of doubling our total climate finance by the end of his first term in office. It will take a lot of work to get Congress to fund that level of effort, but I think it's doable.
Great. And that kind of brings me to another question, I think, of, everybody that you mentioned in terms of looking at enhanced ambition as well today, whether or not they got, to what the hopes and dreams were, they're all developed countries. What about developing countries? I guess, what did we see from them today? And, you know, is it expected that they'll be waiting back a little bit more to see, you know, how the, you know, big emitters step up, go hand in hand with the U.S. and then, you know, potentially come to Glasgow with something more in hand? Was that expected? And, you know, is that the next phase of work, kind of expanding this push and this momentum and energy to everyone, not just those big emitters? I'll throw that, I guess, maybe to Kate and Alden. I mean, because it'll be a lot of engagement from the UK presidency, but from everyone. So maybe Kate, if you want to reflect, and then Alden as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of points there. I mean, firstly, today's summit, the first session of today's summit was all about starting the MEF again, the Major Economies Forum. So that was obviously the initial kind of objective of the US government for this event. I think you know, we should acknowledge that there's a lot of developing countries that have already come forward with ambitious commitments, already come forward with their net zero commitments, and I think we also have to acknowledge these interlinking issues that we've all touched on, the finance issue and the loss of damage issue. And I think it's really important. That's why we as COP26 host, as I say, are seeing this across these kind of three pillars. And if we don't, we will not succeed in any of those pillars. And so I think how we lead in that engagement and how we kind of lead our diplomacy has to bring all those interlinking issues into account. So I think this is an absolutely key milestone on the route to COP26. It's not the only milestone, and we have had other announcements come through. But so I think it's partly reflective of a number of situations of why we saw that today. But you know, especially as it was the Major Economies Forum, so I think there's something in that there.
Alden, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would separate out developing countries into maybe a few categories here. First of all, the vulnerable countries, the small island states, a number of them have made very ambitious NDC proposals, far exceeding those of any of the ones announced today by the US, Canada, Japan, or others, or even the EU. But collectively, they amount to a very small share of global emissions, only a few percent. Then you've got some of the middle income countries that again are doing a fair amount. It'd be great to hear from Juan Pedro on this, on Colombia, on Chile, on Costa Rica, a number of the other countries in Latin America that have come forward. I thought it was interesting what the Indonesian president said today. That in the context of increased finance and technology, Indonesia can do more. Obviously, the big two that everyone is keeping their eye on in terms of emissions are China and India. And there, I think it's a work in progress. I think Prime Minister Modi today from India talking about the package that he's working with the US and announcing this new initiative between the Indian and US governments to come up with the finance and technology assistance to meet India's ambitious 450 gigawatt renewable energy goal by 2030 is big. It's a work in progress. It's not done. I know that Special Envoy Kerry and others were hoping to have something more concrete and detailed to announce at the summit, but I think that commitment is very big, because if India can meet that objective, even de facto, de jure, they won't be saying they're going to phase out coal or ban new coal construction, but de facto that will be the result of that ramp up of renewables. China, it's more complicated. There's a huge dynamic, obviously, between the US and China. China did not want to look like it was being pressured by President Biden in the US to do more when it thinks it's already done more than the US and didn't pull out of Paris and is already meeting its Paris commitments, while the US may fall short of our 2025 goal. But there was a signal from President Xi today, which was interesting, which is to slow the increase in coal during the current 5-year plan that's about to be approved, and then reduce the coal share in the second 5 years before 2030, which is a new indication from China. There's no numbers there. There's no details. Obviously, a lot of work to do, but I think that's something where the UK, the US, others can continue to engage with China to try to get more specifics on the table before Glasgow. And obviously, anything that turns around the momentum in Chinese coal emissions is a game changer for the action tracker group that I mentioned before, did an analysis. If all of the countries that have put net zero pledges on the table, which is now, as was said today, I think by Alok Sharma, about 70% of global emissions under those mid-century pledges, that would by itself get us to around 2.1 degrees, not under 2, not anywhere near 1.5, but far better than we are currently doing with implementation of Paris Agreement pledges, which they scored around 2.9. China is a big part of that. The US is a big part of that. Obviously, the EU is, but India is as well. So I think that's the big question. Will you see more from India, from China, from Indonesia, maybe South Africa, some of the other big G20 players before Glasgow? I think it's still all to play for. And as we made clear before the summit, this is not a one and done event. We can't roll up our sleeves and go home and say, okay, job done. There's a lot of work still to do, but I think today did represent some real momentum in the system.
I agree. Having been around the UNFCCC for many years now, it's about trust building, right? And you know, and the U.S. has been in and out, and this certainly is a huge, you know, step to rebuilding that trust, but it doesn't happen overnight. And I think that was part of the smart move by the U.S. to do this early, is, you know, to kind of leave some space for more, you know, more to build and for that trust kind of to repair, and hopefully by the COP, you know, having a lot more ambition on the table from everyone. So we'll see. Well, that's another thing to keep an eye on. And maybe with that, we'll also turn back to you, Juan Pedro, about, you know, Alden referenced it, but Latin American countries, if there's anything you want to comment on from President Piñera's speech today, or also if you can talk about kind of other things that are happening on the ground in Chile. I think Chile is one of the good examples of where action, you know, is starting to really ramp up in implementation, and especially, you know, your work on carbon markets. Can you talk a little bit more about the well, Chile's NDC, but also, you know, what you're doing to implement it in terms of work with the World Bank and other bilateral agreements, and everything coming into play with markets?
Super, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the link to developing countries, Alden and Alexa. I think we're not waiting for big countries, big emitters to react first. And good examples in the region, for instance, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, you can see in there, we don't have yet climate change law in place. We're about to have one, but you can see in Costa Rica, even in Mexico and in Colombia, you know, these pledges of net zero. We have a pledge of net zero that was committed 2 years ago before Madrid, but this is becoming a reality, and at least in Chile, where President Piñera today, he referred to, not specifically to decarbonize all the energy sector, meaning not just electricity, but also the use of different uses of energy. And that is because there is a big, huge commitment that happened 2 years ago, also, 6 months before Madrid. The main energy utilities made a voluntary commitment of phasing out coal by 2040, and this is already happening. These companies have been shutting down, physically some units. And what is encouraging is that this is happening faster than planned. And this also gives Chile the certainty that at least in the energy sector and the electricity sector by itself, it'll be clean very before 2050. It will be 100% renewal in 2040, even before that. And what is important also, Alexa, is that this coal phase out, even though it's not that relevant in terms of total emissions, it's just 13% of total emissions in 2050. That's the estimation. It triggers a lot of measures that will take us to this carbon neutrality goal earlier than 2050. Of course, we have to, and Kate mentioned this nature-based solution part. I think we have to ignore less the main role that NBS has in terms of getting countries into this path of net zero. And yeah, this is happening in the energy sector in Chile, but also we know that we will need instruments. I was struck by some interventions today in the morning by some leaders that very few mention carbon pricing. I think Canada was very specific into carbon pricing, but not ours. I might be wrong. I didn't listen to all the interventions, but I guess carbon pricing should be part of the equation. We have a carbon tax. It's very low in terms of the value, but we are confident that we could that could pave the way for more meaningful carbon pricing instruments in the future. Article 6, we don't know yet what role will play in our journey to net zero, but for sure we will need this maybe for those sectors that are more difficult to make this transition. Maybe not the electricity sector, because the trend is also it's being has been already set, but other sectors like cement or steel industry, which one I forgot. So cement, steel, and I forgot the other one. But yes, I think we're on track. But I would like to stress to finalize my speech, my intervention, Alexa, to highlight the cooperation side of the Paris Agreement. I mean, Article 6 is one big vehicle for cooperation, and I understand that we don't need to get crazy about resolving Article 6 as it was in Katowice and also in Madrid. Ambition and other issues are even more important, but I think we will need some sort of instruments to facilitate this transition, and Article 6 could be anything. We haven't resolved the core aspects of it, but yeah, and in terms of some initiatives, well, you mentioned some, Alexa. We're part of the climate warehouse of the World Bank, the Climate Market Club. We're trying to see if we can pilot some Article 6 project with Sweden, with Switzerland, as they did Switzerland with Peru, and also with Ghana separately. So I guess we have some space to work, in spite that we don't have the rules in place. But I guess my main message here, and to the ones that are listening to today, is that we need this. I mean, you mentioned it, Alden. We need these rules in place. We need Article 6 rules, UN rules in place, but that shouldn't preclude countries to progress. Remember, Alden, with the CDM, with the prompt start of the CDM, it worked for like 3 years. Then we had all the rules, and when the Kyoto Protocol entered into force, then all those rules were smoothly adopted. So we can think of maybe a similar approach with Article 6. So yeah, I think developing countries are doing a lot, and of course this U.S. announcement today it's a huge one, very much awaited. I know it's going to be difficult for the U.S. to do this transition, but one main message that I got from President Biden today is that the U.S. will get 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035, if I'm not wrong. Mm-hmm. That's huge. I mean, come on, that's coming from the U.S. It's a big impact.
Yeah, just to say, Alexa, maybe one other point here. We'll see this in tomorrow's session on Building Back Better and Jobs, but I think the other two dynamics here affecting developing countries are much bigger than climate. They're the recovery from COVID and how the trillions of dollars that countries are investing to restart their economies in the wake of the pandemic are being allocated. And we know right now from trackers that are out there that a very small share of those trillions of dollars are being invested in things that also decarbonize the global economy. If we don't shift that before Glasgow, we could arrive in Glasgow with a lot of money being spent to lock in carbon-intensive infrastructure that makes 2 degrees out of reach even before we get to Glasgow. So that's important, and that'll be a G20 and G7 issue, and the UK is chairing the G7 presidency, and Kate could talk about that. The other issue is the debt crisis that's facing a number of vulnerable countries that don't have the ability that a Japan or Europe or US do to basically print currency and finance their way with deficit financing out of the crisis. There's progress on the new issuance of special drawing rights by the IMF. There's progress on debt moratoria and possibly forgiveness, but that's a huge millstone around the leaders and the politics in these countries where their people are struggling to stay afloat and keep their livelihood and be able to import food and other commodities they need. So we have to address the debt crisis. We have to get Building Back Better right. Those are separate from the UK Glasgow track, but they're related. And I think we need to also put pressure on the political leaders to address both those issues.
That's a really good point, Alden. And maybe I'll turn to you, Kate, for some thoughts on that. How is the UK thinking of tying, is it working to tie together all these things that Alden mentioned of the COP? I mean, there's already, as you mentioned, enough to think about just with a COP, but then when you tie in COVID recovery, it's the whole world on your shoulders. But it is crucial. I mean, given the level of finance that is happening and needs to happen for recovery, and whether it can make or break, that curve of emissions. How is the UK seeing that, and are you marrying those two efforts? And you're working the G7 and work on recovery with the COP, or is it all hands on deck together, or is it kind of just everybody pushing as hard as they can separately on those issues? How much of a kind of an interplay is there from your side?
I mean, they're completely linked. I mean, we're co-hosting COP26 with Italy, who are also hosting the G20, and obviously, as you mentioned, we're hosting the G7. So it's a brilliant opportunity to bring all of these agendas together, and that's exactly how we view it. So in terms of the COVID recovery and the Build Back Better agenda, obviously that underpins everything we need to do if we're going to have success at COP. And therefore we will use our G7, we work with this year in the G20 as well, to use those key moments to help us make progress on the COP priorities that I've set out. So G7, you'll see a huge focus on ambition. I think Alex Sharma mentioned today, we're now going to get a net zero G7, which is really exciting. You'll see a strong focus on climate finance, as I've already mentioned, and on the nature priorities as well. But of course, that, as I said, that Build Back Better agenda it's absolutely central to the UK's narrative on climate action. And I think we saw it from the US as well today, how the president introduced the NDC was all about jobs and growth opportunities. And we do see it in that light in the UK. And therefore, these issues cannot be separated. If we were going to have to be successful as one, as Alden said, we have to link it to the other. And so you'll see these as core themes right across the year in all these kind of multilateral fora.
Hear that. Great. Well, I think maybe we can turn to then looking forward to the COP, maybe a little bit more procedurally. What are those big milestones? We've mentioned some now, G7, G20, that kind of can build that momentum. Kate, what are the others that you guys have on your radar that the UK presidency has on its radar that people in this audience should take note of? What are kind of some of the big moments and milestones along the way to get us to an ambitious COP26? And then maybe Alden, for you to think about also, to tag team this. What about, where's the private sector here? There's a lot of people, I'm sure, in the audience who are thinking, how can we help and what can we do? And there's of course, a lot of an overabundance sometimes of initiatives in all areas, including the private sector. But what are some of the big ones that you're working on or with, with your various hats that you think could be the most effective for helping to drive that change at the COP, also looking towards, the champions agenda and all the race to zero stuff? Where are some of the big impactful initiatives that you think the private sector should really be pushing and jumping on before the COP? So maybe first to you, Kate, with some of those milestones, and then Alden more specifically on private sector engagement.
Yeah, of course. I think we've touched on quite a few of the key milestones actually in different answers, but just to set them out a little bit in kind of chronological order. Obviously, today's summit and tomorrow's summit is absolutely key. Just some of the other events coming up to flag. We've mentioned the negotiation intersessionals, so they're taking place at the end of May, beginning of June. The G7 leaders will be in June, and the climate and environment ministerials will be in May. And then, of course, we move kind of after summer, we'll have the UN General Assembly, where I think we'll hopefully see some more announcement of increased ambition, and New York Climate Week. We have China is hosting the biodiversity COP, COP15, and of course with the key nature links through to the climate COP, I think that's a really important moment. And then of course we've mentioned the G20. The G20 leaders will be right before COP, so again will be directly linked. So I think we've picked up on quite a few, but I'd probably say those were some of the key high-level moments coming up.
Nice to have them lined up in order. There's so many that it's good to know kind of that drumbeat and how to fit in and what to keep an eye on. And Alden.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to those as a number of regional fora and sort of major bilaterals between EU and China, or China and Africa, or US, Latin America. We have all those opportunities where leaders are gathering to keep in the press. And if we're able to get in September for the opening of in one place, conversations and with towards net asset these new initiatives on like the banks and other to with investment portfolios, and then as mentioned today, still account for about $500 billion a year, going to encourage production and consumption of something we say we don't want, unconstrained fossil fuel emissions to the atmosphere. And the first rule of holes is when you find yourself in a hole, you stop digging. Negative price on carbon in all too many sectors of the economy. So I think there's work that can be done there, and the business community is essential to that, because one of the arguments that's used against carbon pricing is it would be too expensive, it would affect competitiveness, it would throw
Oops, we seem to have lost Alden. But with that, it's actually great timing. We have 2 minutes left in the session. So, oh, he's back. So I just wanted to give everybody, Alden, sorry we lost you there, but I was just going to say it's probably a good opportunity to give you all 30 seconds to wrap up and then close the session out. So if there's anything last final words you want to say, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us. I know it's late again on the East Coast, and thanks to the panelists. You guys are amazing experts, and it's been really rich. I've learned a lot as well. So if there's anything, final closing words, Juan Pedro, to you first. Will COP deliver on the Paris Agreement?
Yes, it will. It will. Maybe a message to the private sector that is listening today is to find ways to work more together with governments and to align these net zero targets of companies with, this overall net zero targets of countries. And the second message is that it's doable. I mean, if we work all together, it's doable. And also let's try to learn and try to pilot, whatever activity we can develop under Article 6. I think it's essential to learn. And one last, sorry, Alex, to take the time. One last final message. We need some experience before. I mean, countries will need to develop the infrastructure to implement Article 6, for instance. It's not going to be, I mean, the next day that we have the rules, the market will be there. So we need to accommodate the needs of all the countries and also the private sector, and try to come out with a robust article. And in the end, if there's any need of a transition period, why not? Should be very short. There could be a transition period to learn and to be in a position to implement this in the best way possible. So that's my final message.
Alden, 30 seconds. Will COP deliver on Paris?
Well, I believe it can, and I'm certainly doing everything I can, and others are, to make sure it does, backing the UK, which is putting a tremendous amount of diplomatic firepower behind this. And it's good to have the US in alignment and back and working with the UK and others in the run-up to COP26. But let's be clear, even if we get all the outcomes that Kate talked about at the beginning, we're not done yet. I mean, we have a 23 to 25 gigaton gap in ambition between where we need to be in 2030 and where the projections are the world is heading by 2030. I would be ecstatic if we could get 8 to 10 gigawatts of emissions reductions booked by Glasgow. That would still leave us 10 or 15 gigawatts more to do after Glasgow. So this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. We're going to have work to do after Glasgow. And one of the things the UK will need to start thinking about is how they use their presidency after Glasgow through most of 2022 in the run-up to COP27 in Africa to keep the pressure on, working with whoever the African incoming presidency is going to be. This is a relay race. We're going to be handing off the baton, but we have to keep the eye on the prize, which is that drive to net zero, along with the drive to deal with adaptation impacts and loss and damage.
Wonderful. And Kate, last but not least, final thoughts from the UK presidency.
I mean, I'll keep it quick. I think, as we've discussed, there's a lot of challenges. There's a long way to go, but I think it's absolutely vital that we use COP26 to keep the goals of the Paris Agreement in sight, and it's possible to reach them. So I think the collaboration point is just key. You know, the point is, if we all work together, we're all pushing in the same direction, we'll make this progress faster. We've proven that so far to date. You know, we've overreached many of the goals that we expected a few years ago. So COP26 will not solve it all. Hopefully we'll make some really substantial progress together, but still a few obstacles to overcome, but we're definitely getting there.
Wonderful. Well, I like that optimism. I think today is a day of optimism. Let's keep it. Let's take it. You know, take advantage of this day of optimism. We needed it after a long 4 years. So thank you all for joining us. Thanks to the panelists, to all the participants. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to the rest of the events tomorrow and NACW. So between the summit and NACW, we've got a lot on our plates and more coming, as we heard from everyone. So we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.